Good evening to all, and welcome to the Chatter After's official companion podcast to HBO's The Last of Us, where we chat and seek the chatter and the art beyond the clickers. I'm Brandon from the Chatter After, and of course, I'm joined by my Beyond the Clickers co-host, Brett Miro. What's up, man?
Hey, I'm here. What's going on? Another great week, another great show.
Yes. We're here to break down episode 2 of The Last of Us on HBO, Infected. So much happens in this show, in this episode, even though this episode was a lot shorter than the first one. But so great stuff. Phenomenal things happen for show viewers only and also for gamers as well. There's a lot of great stuff. And we're going to talk some articles that we saw that were very interesting in regards to things that happened after the premiere of this episode. And of course, with the ongoing popularity with non-gamers alike of The Last of Us. And then we're going to break down the things that make this episode phenomenal. And at the end, as usual, we'll do a deep dive on the things that are very legitimately extracted and evolved from the video game, what stayed from the video game, and how they adapted it, and break that down for you guys. So, Brett, I'm excited to talk about this. So let's start. Let's go right into it. Let's go into these articles. I mean, the first one, of course, not that we should be surprised, right? Just
Right.
like Steve Buscemi is not a one-trick pony.
That's right. He is not.
The Last of Us is still putting out their Steve Buscemi numbers. Apparently, the viewership went up 22% from the last episode.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
That is word of mouth, my friend.
Yes.
That is like, yo, you got to check the show out. It's awesome.
Yes.
It's really good. And
Yes.
maybe, and also just like sometimes you miss it. You're like, oh crap, it came out already. Yeah, I didn't realize. Okay, cool. There's 2 episodes. I'll catch up. So there's a lot of that, but that's impressive.
That's huge. And it's beautiful. Like, look, those are kind of the advantages of the streaming era, right? Because back in the day, if you missed it, you missed it. You
Right.
can't really go back and watch it. Maybe there's a re-release of the episode somewhere. But the fact that streaming,
You had to wait till the DVD box set
Yes.
came out.
and then for some reason you have that plot hole that doesn't make sense throughout the entire season. And then when you were able to rewatch it, you're like, oh, I just didn't watch that episode.
Yeah. Oh, I see what happened.
So I was the problem.
Yes.
So I love how word of mouth of this has been phenomenal. I go back to your first reaction on the chat that we have. You literally went, "They like you." Like
Yeah.
that literally is like encapsulates
They like you.
everything there. Yeah, and the best thing about it is that you can tell these are the kind of stats that to me are remarkable, because what these stats really represent is that non-gamers are loving the show.
Yeah, general audiences are showing
Yes.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest win, right? Because it's not just the fact that we're eating good as great fans of The Last of Us. A bunch of people that never knew what it was, they're discovering this for the first time. And actually, the best of fans love reinterpretations that allow them to rediscover the story, right?
Yeah.
And this is definitely doing that, not only for newcomers but also for gamers alike, and it shows in the numbers. So this is going to be a very interesting story to keep track, to see where it goes, because it looks like this is just a train that just keep grabbing. It's like the Infected, you know what I mean? It's just getting one little bit of the city at a time.
That's exactly what it is.
And I'm excited.
It's the hive mind of the cordyceps. It's starting to spread, and it's like everybody watch the
Tendrils.
show. A lot of it too is I think I'll give you. There's 3 letters, and that's why the show I think is doing what it is. HBO.
Okay. Yes.
Because I don't doubt that it would be if it was this level of quality and production and same cast and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I don't doubt that it would do well on another streaming service like Netflix or Amazon. I think it would, but I think there's something about it being on HBO that's like it really does. Like, HBO carries a prestige with it. I think,
Correct.
in my opinion, and
I agree.
so that's a big deal.
Yeah, there's a server. I mean, there's really no bad shows in HBO. I think more than anything, there's a lot of variety in HBO. And like you said, HBO doesn't narrowly put their stamp on everything. Like, they don't greenlight everything. And I'm pretty confident that so many people come to them like, hey, we want to do this show, but they don't say yes to anybody. But where
Yeah.
they put their stamp on, even if it's not a show that you would like, or maybe it's not your preference type of show, you can tell that the production value is always there. Like that is something that's never in doubt. It's always present. Like the best of like it's like I think the easiest way to see it, like how we always talked about, and you Mario talk about it a lot when you talk about movies, is like, especially now with streamers, is like there are a lot of movie stars that you would never imagine that would come to do a show, right? But they would come do an HBO show.
Right.
They would, so that gives it's that same kind of particular prestige and interesting thing. Derpy Entertainment, thank you for joining us on this episode. He says on the chat, let's talk about the beginning of the episode again. It sets the tone. Trust me, we're going to get there.
Yeah, we're definitely going to cover that.
About that. And yes, the original opening is just so great.
Yes.
And I love how we're going to jump into that. So I don't want to jump ahead because we want to break that down bit by bit.
Yeah, but we'll get it. We'll do it for sure.
Yes. But there was another piece of news that I think came out of nowhere. And as you can see, I'm wearing my PlayStation colors. Like, I got Miles, I got God of War here, right? And so a bunch of games are being purchased and are coming back into the ranks in terms of highest sales of 2022. And there may not be number one or number two, but in the 20 and 23rd spot, we pretty much have The Last of Us is selling ridiculously because of this release.
Sony loves this. They love the synergy. They love the synergy.
Sony and HBO are like winning.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, to think about this. Look at this piece of the article. If you guys want to look at the article, it's an article by Game Industry. IGN just put a tag on the tweet. I just put the tweet on there. Literally, the two biggest points that stand out is the biggest riser of the week. Of course, in this article, Game Industry, what it does, it's really ranking the most sold games, pretty much up to the week of January 21st for the beginning of the year, right? And it says the biggest riser of the week is The Last of Us Part 1, the remake, not the original.
Is the PS5 remake,
The PS5 remake, which in some places is still a full pop game, which I spent full pop on it, and I'm 100% happy because that game was a phenomenal, great way to replay. We will talk soon. Derby Entertainment says, so Brandon, let's talk about Forspoken. Another pod, but it can't happen. So the biggest rise of the week, Last of Us Part 1, 2022, PS5 only release, which returns to the charts because it made the charts when it released originally. It came back to the charts at number 20 with the 238% spike in sales week on week. That is ridiculous. That's like, it's selling more than when it really came out.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is crazy. But not only that.
Yeah, this was interesting to me, but also maybe not that surprising, but yeah.
But it makes sense though. And it goes into the argument. Like a lot of people, we know there was a faction. There's a group of people in the internet, right, that questioned the why of the remake, right?
Right.
And it's very interesting to me because as someone that has played all the versions, right? The story I enjoyed it so much that I went back and played it again. But I like the idea of this, which is technically the same thing the show is doing, is that with numerous versions, it means that more people can experience it.
Yep.
A lot of people see it as a cash grab. You know what? Maybe it is. It doesn't matter. But the idea that people that are buying it are spending money on it and they're loving it. Is it really a cash grab if people are enjoying what they're purchasing? You know what I mean?
Right. Listen, yeah, it's your choice to purchase, the game. It's an individual's choice to do that. So, like,
right.
Is it hurting anybody that they made it? And they outsourced it anyway. I don't think they someone else like worked on it and they just kind of oversaw it, made sure like gave the approvals. But yeah, it's like if they're doing that, like I get why people are like, well, we didn't need it. And it's like, all right, well then cool, don't buy it. Like no one's forcing you to buy it. But then like I think people are just like frustrated because they deep down inside they do want to be a part of the zeitgeist. They do want to play it in this high fidelity, but they're just like torn by their own personal, choices that like, well, it's the principle. My principle is that I'm not going to do it. And it's like, all right, like listen, like for me, I obviously I adore the game. That's why I'm obsessed with the show, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. Like I
Yes.
adore it.
Yes.
But I guess like I told you, I only played through it once. I played through it when I got it, and I never
Yeah.
played it again. It stuck with me. I remember it in very great detail, and but like for like the PS1 remake, the Part One remake. I mean, not the PS1 remake. The Part
There's
One
a
remake.
video out
That'd
there
be a
of
very
someone that
different
did
game.
it in PS1 graphics. There
Yeah,
has to
they did a
be.
demake. There's a demake,
Yes.
100%.
Yes. Yes.
So, but like for me, like I was just like, yeah, I don't need to shell out, 60, $70 to play it again, and nothing against the game, nothing against it, but it's just like, yeah, I didn't need to do it. And guess what? I'm not upset and crying about it. I just didn't
Yeah.
buy it, and it's
Yeah.
fine.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, like, I made the decision to do it, and I love the experience. I even shared it on Twitter. It was amazing. But at the same time, I'm a geek for details, so that was something for me. It was a very personal choice. But at the same time, the idea that people's first PlayStation console, it's probably a PS5. Now they have the opportunity to play it on the console with the degree of detail and technology that the PS5 has to offer. And what also was very interesting to me when the original when Part Two came out for PS4 Pro, and now the PS5 version is out, I can play Part One and go to Part Two, and the graphic design feels seamless. It doesn't
Right.
feel like I'm playing a very old port of a game
Right.
and then going into this high quality game. Which again,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, I've enjoyed it myself.
Yeah.
Right? But the idea is that this one, the remastered, which by the way, so the PS5 just came out. The PS5 version came out late last year, right?
Yeah, I think it was September. Yeah.
The PS4 version, the remastered, came out in 2014, and it got it back into the charts at number 32 with a sales spike of 322%.
Right.
Now here's
But
the
also,
beauty
how
of that.
much is that game right now?
It's like $20. Because
Yeah,
that's the
exactly. So I
thing,
mean,
though.
that's why I was like, I'm kind of surprised that like the old one is spiking, but I'm like, yeah, but people were like, oh, I'll pay that one for $20 because I think for the most part, I mean, I don't know, Brandon, I haven't played the new one. Like I said, I didn't pick it up,
Yeah,
but like,
right.
I mean, you think the remastered like still holds up, or does it feel like
I think it
super
does.
clunky? No,
No,
I mean,
well,
it's
the
probably
remastered,
I'm sure it feels a little clunky, but
right. It definitely feels clunkier than the first one, right? Now, the good thing about, like, personally, what I love, my experience playing the PS5 version, what was great about it was that it felt like I was playing Part Two because of the fidelity of the graphical design. It didn't have the controls, like it was literally the same controls, but it felt like a fresh experience. It felt smooth. The visuals were great and enticing. All the enhancements of the graphics allowed, because that's one of the main things also. The idea of The Last of Us being remade per Neil Druckmann, which I think is justified because this is what he said, and I played it and I saw it, right?
right,
Is that with the advancements that now they have with all the models, they were able to take those original performances and make and deliver them better. Because
right.
they didn't recapture the models. They used
Yeah, there's probably
original
more points of
performances.
articulation. There's more
Exactly.
memory. It can
Yes.
do a lot more processing, so they could just make more realistic
Yeah.
stuff out of that
Yeah.
data.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I enjoyed it the most. But
No,
the idea
definitely.
that it was in the charts. But the funny thing is, you got a full price game, and then you got one you can buy for $20.
Yeah.
And it's because it's part of the PlayStation Hits collection, which is like that collection
Right.
of games that are all $20, right? Like you can get God of War 2018 for like $20 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like to me, what it screams is PlayStation just wants you to try it, and some people that have PS Plus can play it for free. Like,
Right.
so hey, at the end of the day, The Last of Us for everybody. You get a Last of Us, and you get a Last of Us, and you get a Last of Us. It's great.
Yeah.
So, are you ready to talk about the episode?
Yeah, let's do it. This is
Let's
a
jump
good
into
one,
this.
man. This was
What
freaking
was
good.
your first impressions of the episode before we start breaking it down? When you saw this, you saw it live or you saw it after?
I did watch it live. Yes.
Okay, talk to us.
So yeah, first impressions of this episode. I loved it. It was awesome. It was so close to like how it it happens in the game, which was like really, really cool. I mean, we should also mention this episode was directed by Neil Druckmann.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the
Yes.
director on this episode.
It was
and
written
you
by
could,
Craig Mazin, and it was directed by Neil Druckmann. Yes.
so you could feel his touch, all over
Yes.
this, and so that's exactly why I was like, okay, this is like a cutscene from the game. It was excellent. It had like such great tension. had some, cool little surprises and
Yeah.
little twists and just like little like wrinkles that they've adding to the lore, and I absolutely love that. Because it's exciting for someone, like I said, for general audiences, they're getting all this cool world building. For people that are so familiar with the story, I'm just getting new little bits of information, and it just keeps it fresh. Even when, like I
Yes.
said, most of the stuff is unfolding as is, but it just those little keep it fresh. And nothing that they've done so far has really bothered me. Also, one of the big changes we talked about last week. I'll be vague now until we really start talking about it. Resulted in some really cool shit this week. Like
Yes.
there was some
Yes.
really cool, unique, like horror freaky stuff, and it was
Yeah.
like it empowered the show, even more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very excited. Like, and also where the episode leads us off is like, okay, now we are, spoilers for obviously for the episode, but we're left really now with our core duo.
Yes.
It set us
Yes.
up for like it really set us up for the journey, their journey. And I thought it was great. What about you?
I loved it. But what I liked the most about it, and like you said, like I love how different and how familiar it felt. I
Yeah,
think that's what I loved the most about it because I think even more than episode one. Like episode one, because it was longer and there was a lot of more gaps that they filled with more
right.
story and deep diving and more into certain characters. This one felt so simple and tight, so it felt the
Yeah,
most different, but at the same time the most familiar of both episodes.
sure.
So I really liked how that felt. I liked that as I was watching the characters going through it, I can feel the beats of the game, but also the beats of the story. And there's certain Easter eggs there that to me were just very well hidden in a way, but I enjoyed them so much. But more importantly, like, yeah, it feels real. The changes that they made makes everything feel even more palpable and real. Like
Yeah,
the show, it's really growing into its own identity. And that's really what I like the most. And that's kind of what I want to see. Like I want to see because it's like anything. You can change, you can modify as long as you keep the essence of the story, of the beats, of what you know that people care about, right? So the idea that I'm seeing all this expansion, but it's not it's not distancing itself from what it needs to be, but it's becoming its own version of what it is.
yeah, and I think it's also just some changes just make sense for the medium. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a different medium. Some things do need to be tweaked. Not everything is going to translate as it does in the game when
Right.
you're playing an interactive medium. You're
Right.
doing a passive medium now. So I think some of that stuff, like something as simple as like obviously there's not going to be spores, and
Right.
so like because but they don't, why do they have Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey? They're probably paying them a ton of money. They don't want to cover their face with gas masks, and it might sound stupid to people or whatever, but like they don't want to do it probably. You know what I mean? It's just let's give another change, and like obviously
Right.
these tendril things are pretty cool.
Yeah, they're
And I do
very
want to
real.
shout out that something happened in this episode that I kind of like predicted, and I was like, when it happened, I was like, yes. But I'll wait till we get there.
Okay, cool,
Um,
cool, cool.
so yeah,
So
so yeah, how are you? You want to talk about the opening?
let's, bro,
Good, let's do it.
bro. There's
I
so
know
much that
Derpy wants to talk about
happens.
that opening.
Yes, yes. Derp, this is the moment. We're gonna talk about the opening.
Yes.
Um, this was crazy. Like 2 times in a row, right?
Yeah.
You're presented with very original takes, and but also I love how it's all about giving us more understanding of
Yeah.
not the virus, the fungus. Giving us
Listen,
more.
we're gonna call. I know I was called out about saying virus the whole time. It's not a virus. So what I'm gonna do to correct it, and thank you for calling my bluff. Thank you for calling my bluff. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna just call it Seps.
Or we can call it Toad.
We're just calling it the Seps.
Yes,
All
the
right.
steps.
So we're gonna talk about the Seps from now on. All right.
The
That's
steps represent.
that way
Represent.
you can't say anything to me anymore. It's the Seps. All right.
So, so I love how they're making it a point to pull all the drama around the seps up front, so we can
Yes.
focus on story, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a brilliant way of making exposition interesting, but also not allowing exposition to drag the story down.
Right.
Because when you play the game, when you know the original story, right? I'm trying to keep away from the game. When you know the original
Yeah.
story, it's not about the exposition. It's about the experiences that you live with the characters, right? This
Yeah.
is that kind of story because survival. It's all about how they react to situations, what decisions they make. It's really that's what makes the story move forward, right? But so the whole thing with the Seps, of putting it up front, not just in the first episode in a brilliant manner, in the second episode,
Yeah.
just blew my mind.
And these are, and then we should also too, like just for people that are interested, these are not in the game. We do
Right,
not get these flashback
right,
1960s. This look at Jakarta. We don't
right.
get any of that in the games. It just stays with Joel and Ellie, the
Yep.
whole time and their journey. So this is cool because, like again, like I mentioned last week about how important that first opening episode, part of the episode was,
Yeah.
because it was introducing familiar viewers and new viewers alike to something a little different, something new.
Yeah.
And I like that they continued that. And I'm cool if they keep continuing at that, as long as they're this
Yeah.
like riveting on kind of like an analytical like level too. I think it's smart because again, you really have to cater to general audiences as well, not just game fans.
Right.
So I think like having these little like flashback moments and these little like exposition moments, it kind of adds like this like mystery kind of element, and I think that's something that is very grabbing to general audiences.
Yeah.
It's that I need to know a little more, but also at the same time, like the story is about Joel and Ellie. The Seps is just I almost said virus. The Seps is just a background, and it's just a backdrop of everything. So I like it. Like they're just kind of like. They're just demystifying it off the bat, and that's cool because, like, again, we don't need to be like wondering about that. Like, now we have the cool information, we understand what's going on, so there's not really anything frustrating happening. It's just we just really get to enjoy the relationships that we're going to see develop with these characters.
Yeah.
So I think it's smart. I mean, like. It's smart from like just like the behind the scenes, like the writing of it, like the directing of it, and just like hey, I need to grab the attention of an audience, like from that perspective, like the slimy businessy part where it's like, how do we get eyes on this and how do we get them to stick with it every week? That's what it is. But it's smart. It's just like smart like storytelling and smart just like show development.
Everyone's smart, Brett. Everyone here is smart, and I can see the brains.
Smart.
No, but I 100% agree. Now, I never imagined that another flashback would have been scarier than the first flashback we got in episode 1. So
that one was ominous. This was like legit scary.
Right. So let's go back. Let's turn the clock back. Right. This occurs. If my memory serves me, 3 days before the outbreak in the U.S.
Yes.
So the interesting thing about it is it's taking us back to D-Day. It's taking it back to Outbreak Day, to the moment to the place where it all started, and it really ties back to the conversation of episode 1 where they're having breakfast, where you hear in the radio there's disturbances in Jakarta. So it's like it was happening in Jakarta. And then you go here, and the whole thing about getting people with knowledge, like getting people that know science. When you hear the doctor say, let me tell you this, I've been studying this all my life. And he's looking at the guard, at the captain or general, whatever, in the face and says, there is no medicine.
There is no vaccine.
There is no vaccine. And the guy goes, so what do we do? And she says, bomb.
Yeah.
Bomb the city. Bomb everything.
Yeah.
And as soon as the cat's out of the bag, she goes like, I would like to be with my family now. Like, it's like, and like she's literally saying something that's horrifying, but at the same time she's saying, that's all we got. So
like, you need to kill this no matter how many civilian lives you take. And then I like jumping ahead quickly, we get a call back to that when they start seeing the craters in the city zone, and Ellie says this looks like a fucked up moon or something. It's just
like a moon crater,
like a moon crater, like a fucked up moon crater. And then Tess goes, well, they basically did this to every major city as soon as like they found out,
to try and stop the spread.
To try and stop, they had to slow down the spread. And it's like, oh wow, that's fucking cool. That's rad.
It's horrible, but it's cool.
It's horrible, but it's like a rad.
It's a connection.
Just element. Yeah.
Yeah, and how beautiful the depiction, right? Because once we see this, like the idea that the creative team made it a point to put science in the forefront
Yeah.
because they want to find ways to tickle the viewer's brain so
Yeah.
that it's like they're literally telling the audience, we understand you're not stupid. We're not
Right.
trying, you know what I mean? Like, we're not trying to put the wool over your eyes. Like, this is the science. This is the ideas behind it. And we want you to buy into this show, and that's the way they do it.
Yeah. I wonder if I don't know. Did you ever read the book World War Z?
I did not. I saw the
Okay.
horrible movie.
Yeah, the movie was not good. The book's cool, man. I like that book a lot.
Yeah.
But something that's neat about that, and this gives me vibes, is like the way World War Z is written. It's kind of like each like chapter or like section of the book is a tale, because it's written almost as like a history book if you've ever read
Okay.
it. So it's
Okay.
like someone who's basically the World War Z has happened already, and this guy's a journalist, and he goes around to like different like people in different countries, like that were like on the government or like in like science or whatever, like, and it's basically like almost like him like interviewing them on like, hey, how did your country like overcome the zombie apocalypse, like how did you deal with it? So you get like Israel built this huge wall and they walled in the city and it kept them out, but then eventually they started like I think they actually do that in the Brad Pitt movie where they climb up and pile up and come over. So like that's very cool. In the Northeast, for example, there was like in like the Hudson Valley, there were all these zombies and they were trying to like blow them up and like shooting like rockets and all this like big firepower, but like it wasn't doing anything. And then eventually they realized that like they just had to resort to like old school firing lines. So like one group would like shoot, get all the headshots, knock a whole wave of zombies down. They would get down, reload, and the guys behind them would come and then they would stand up and then pop. And like they just kind of like kept like knocking it down and funneling them into a valley to do that. And like you just hear all these cool stories, like how China basically just like abandoned their people, like the government like hopped on like submarines and they just like left the mainland and like screwed everybody. Like, so it's a really, really cool thing. But anyway, I'm like talking too much about World War Z.
No,
You would love it. It's
You're
a
in
really
the
easy
topic.
read and it's a dope book. But like
Cool.
these little scenes give me that vibe. It's like, okay,
Right.
like what's going on here in Indonesia, and like what that flashback thing was cool, but like yeah, like they talk about like how they figured out the virus and like what to do, and like that's what it gives me vibes. And like I wonder if there was any inspiration from that at all.
I mean, you can tell that like when Neil made the story, like the idea that he first pitched it to George Romero, you can tell
Right.
that he's like he is tuned in to the best zombie stories, right?
Yeah.
Because whether or not you see this as a zombie story, it is within that genre because of the type of creatures and humanoid monsters that we find because of the outbreak, right? Now, after the presentation, after the scene in Jakarta, right after we hear her say no vaccine, we get the intro, and then we get this shot.
Yep.
Which is, again, we knew Neil Druckmann was already a brilliant storyteller and director.
Right.
But how interesting it is to not only speak about 20 years ago that there is no solution to this, and suddenly we start with this shot. Like this gift, right? Like something has delivered this gift to the world.
Yes.
There's a solution. Now, of course, not moving ahead, but we know the situation with her because if you're listening to us, you've seen the episode, so you know what the deal is. But I love the fact that they presented her here. But things that they did that were very interesting is that as soon as they find out in the last episode, right, in the middle of the rain, as soon as they live the QZ, right, they find out that she's infected. They stop.
Right.
And they wait it out.
Yep.
I found that super interesting.
Yeah,
was that a curveball for you? Like I mean, it makes but it's funny. It makes total sense in the world.
Yeah, you're like, I don't trust her. Like, we gotta watch her and make sure she don't turn because I ain't having this little girl run at me and bite me.
yes. I love how they're all like super scared and like Joel is like trigger happy, like yeah, bro.
Yeah, Joel's like, I want to shoot her. Like, we should just shoot.
I was like, what do you mean? Well, I mean, I just threw that kid in the fire. I mean, let's just shoot her. I mean,
No.
it's we just have to shoot. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Now, now, what I love about this scene is there's a lot of information that's thrown at us, right? We get a feeling that she's immune because there's these doctors and all that stuff, right? And I love that the first reaction of Joel is, "I call bullshit." Like,
Yeah.
like that was like typical Joel, right? Because he's like because again, like we talked about in the first episode, Joel's over it. Like he's not. He's just trying to survive day in
No
day
fucks to
out.
give, man. No
He
fucks to
needs
give.
exactly that. Like he gave up on that a long time ago. Like he's shutting the world out. He has to find his brother. He's only doing it because of a freaking battery, right? And now he's dealing with this type of fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
So when now the interesting thing here is Tess. Like Anna Torv in this episode was just epic.
She's
She was
awesome.
just
Yeah.
great. She
She's
was
so
just
good.
phenomenal. I like, and also I love how different she is when she talks to Joel, and how different she is when she talks to Ellie.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many different shades to Tess, and there's so much backstory there that's interesting. I love how lived these characters feel. Like,
Yeah.
I feel that these are people that have been around.
They've been
You know
through
what
some
I mean?
stuff.
Yes, yes. I love how every time they move, they talk, the way they carry themselves. These are not people that are just like, they're not cosplaying. Like, this is like actual people bringing their life stories. And I love how it feels so alive. Now, with Tess, when you notice that she kind of gets like a sparkly eyed glitter of hope when she finds out about Ellie, when they start having this conversation, and she's trying to keep Joel in line, right? Because Joel's the attack
Right.
dog, right? What did you think about that scene or those moments when you start seeing some hope in Tess?
Yeah, I mean that she, like, obviously great acting, conveyed like so well. Yeah, like that was cool, and like almost like in a way it was like heartwarming in a way, like, oh wow, like she's bringing, like, yeah, like hope back into the world,
Yeah.
and she's seeing, like, you could tell, like, yeah, like she realizes like what this could actually mean. She's not just looking at it as a job anymore at that point. She's like, oh, like we could kind of like maybe get the world back to like the way it was. And at the end of the day, I think that's what everyone deep down longs for, even though it seems
Right.
so far gone. So yeah, no, I mean, it's, a lesser actress, like wouldn't have like been able to convey that, because
Yep.
it's subtle too, because she's still a little tough on her, she's still a little like interrogating of her, but like you just do see there's like a little switch, and then that leads us to later on we really see it take over her.
Yeah. And it's interesting. What I love about that scene in particular, when they're having that conversation, is that now there's this clear split between the smugglers. There's a dichotomy of ideas, right? Like it's like Joel is over everything, but not only he's over everything, like he sees the world for what it is, not for what it can be. Because if he begins to hope anything, he's gonna break even more. Like he's been broken so much by this world that he cannot hope anymore. And I like the idea that there's a theme that they're kind of toggling here, which I wonder if it's gonna carry on. Is it's apart from the fact that the episode's called Infected, right? And of course we're talking about Ellie being infected and stuff like that. The idea that Tess has been infected by hope, and she's trying to infect Joel with hope.
Yeah.
I find this so interesting because it goes into that idea that this is a story about love. Love is emotion. Can be contagious. And the idea, like I was listening to the podcast after the episode, right? The HBO podcast with,
Sure.
with them. And one of the things that they talk about is that the idea of love is everywhere, even with the fungus. And we'll talk about it when we get to that point. But like, what do people do when they love each other? They make more of each other. So what is the
Right.
fungus doing? Make more of themselves.
Yeah, it's a love
You know,
fungus.
It's
Love fungus.
for some reason there's Tim Meadows in the background, like the
Yeah.
love guru, like love fungus. This is so bad. But one of the things that was interesting, which kind of goes back to this character trait that Tess is presenting, is that supposedly one of the things that they mentioned in the HBO podcast is that apparently they had shot a backstory for Tess.
Oh,
And
that's
supposedly,
cool.
I mean, not they shot it, but I think they wrote it. And apparently, Tess had a husband. Tess had a son. They both got infected. She had to take out her husband, but she couldn't get her son. So she locked him in the basement.
Right.
And the idea that she lost everything, just like Joel, which again, loss is another emotion that brings people together, right? When you share that kind of loss, you either live by yourself or you connect with people that can have some type of empathy for what you've been through.
Right.
And every time she talks about to Joel, especially now with the whole thing with Ellie, is like she's talking with Joel about, you know what we've done, you know what, let's finish this together, let's finish this last thing, and let's keep doing what we're doing. But I like the idea of her having that kind of backstory because it just opens and explains the direction that they're taking her.
Yeah, because like again, like how would they cross paths? And like I guess it's kind of not really like touched on very heavily, but like I guess it was like it's like a semi-romantic relationship between Tess and Joel.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's heavily implied in those final moments, right towards the end of the episode. There's certain things that she says that actually makes everything just hits so much harder. And did you notice that Tess kind of goes into like Mon mode? She gets like super like caretaker
protective, right? Yeah,
yes,
like your instincts are still gonna kick in fight or flight, So that didn't leave her,
Yep. Every time they're walking, she's always up front. She's the one ahead. When they see the pack of runners, which by the way, when you saw that, the pack of runners just there, right? Just
like the hundreds of them, just like
hundreds of them, just there. And I found that so fascinating because I know that we're going to talk about the game stuff later, but one of the most brilliant and
there he is.
What's up, Mike?
Hey, better late than never.
Did someone step on the tendrils and you kind
of... Yeah, and now I'm here. Watashi ga kita.
Yes. So we're talking about when we encounter the runners. Now, one of the things that's interesting, and I lost my train of thought, but that one of the choices that they make for this episode is that it takes place during the day.
Yeah.
It doesn't take place at night, which it brings another color palette and a lot of and it makes it a more interesting scene. Like especially that shot when you saw those runners there, and the effect and how connected they are. What were your thoughts? What was your reaction when you saw that?
No, I love that. I mean, like that to me is I always love like the hive mind aspect, like that they in certain media that they do. I think it's cool. It's creepy. It adds like this kind of like organic, like bioorganic element to it, and it's just neat, and just like know that they're all kind of like writhing there, but they're all ready to like just move up together in whatever formation they need to do to like infect and spread the seps. So
I love how informed of the world Joel and Tess are. Because, again, not only are they smugglers, but they're also Ellie's guide into the world, but they act as our guide into the world, right?
They've been living in there for 20 years, so they know.
Yes, and then the way that she explains it, like she has the line where she goes, the fungus grows underneath the cities and streets. A line of fungus can cover almost a mile. If you trip a fungal line, you could wake up a dozen infected a mile away. Now they know where you are. Now they come.
That's terrifying, man.
Being immune doesn't make you you're not immune to being teared apart.
Right.
Like
I called that. That's the thing I called when we were talking at episode 0. I said, they're doing the tendrils. Maybe it'll be like a thing if they step on it. I think it's legit.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
And then like when she said
like
the show, I was like, yes.
If you go back to that episode, you see me doing like my Jim Halpert impression where I just look in the camera like, does he know?
That's gonna be a short.
You knew already.
That's awesome. But like Mike, when you first saw this, like getting caught up, right? We're making our way towards the hotel. because we got to go the long way, right? We got to figure out what's our path. When you first saw these runners, oh, by the way, that's the proper name for those that don't know. We call them runners. When you first saw them, like and how connected they were, what was your reaction to this?
Why wasn't this in the video game? Like, honestly, like think about all of the video game tropes. Like the idea of you accidentally make one wrong move and now you've got a horde of runners after you is like that should have been a stage in the game. And so that's why it works so well in my opinion, because it feels natural to the story of The Last of Us. And so when it happens here, you're just like, okay, that makes sense, to the point where I had friends who have played the game think that this was a thing in the game. It's like, that's why we're sneaking around. It's like, no, that's not.
No.
Yeah.
The only reason you're sneaking is for what we're going to talk about in a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for sure. I loved this moment. It added so much depth to this story and to these characters. And like you were saying before, seeing how Joel and Tess are at this point, because again, we did that big time jump in the middle of last episode, and so we just get to see how much the world has changed and how much Joel has adjusted and acclimated to what's going on as well. So I thought it was great.
Yeah,
now,
they're cool little. I would say before we move on, just a cool little detail. Again, world building stuff. But when they were explaining when that line, about the fungus, and she was telling Ellie, she basically mentioned too that the reason there's so many there is because like other like squads or like I guess like smugglers and people outside the QZ had tried to go that path and they kept getting killed and attacked in the middle of it. So then there's like every couple of days there's like a few more appear because like 3 guys got caught in one of the groups. And I was like, that's like a really cool thing that there's this one bottleneck that everyone always tries to shortcut through, gets totally screwed, and then it just keeps adding to this like giant sea of runners. And it's that's a cool little detail. I like that stuff.
No, and I love that you brought that up, because the way she says it is horrifying, because it also symbolizes the connectivity of the fungal network and its infected swarm, because she literally says that's how they get the city bit by bit.
Yep.
That's how I got fungus in my house. It's the same natural flow, and it's just, again, super interesting, super great writing, and again, I love how organic we're learning about this. Now, when we get to the hotel, which I think there's an Easter egg there, but we'll talk about Easter eggs later. Ellie can't swim.
Yeah.
And I love how Joel goes, really? And he just hops a step. It was hilarious. It was just hilarious.
That made me laugh so much, because it's like, oh, he didn't have to go searching to find a way to get her across.
Yeah,
lucky
he didn't have
you,
to get
Pedro
a pallet
Pascal.
and push it around.
Yes.
But again, it's because it's funny because like they like in the game they just made her not swim just because it was like for gameplay, but like for this like they don't have to do that, but like they stuck with it, which is great. Like I'm sure it'll come into play later too. Though I'm sure there will be like a big Ellie drowns, Joel saves her moment. I think there is a moment actually that in the game, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think so.
No, but I love also how she goes back to the idea like, you think there's pools in the QZ?
Yeah, she's
like there's no way for her to learn, so it makes perfect sense. She hasn't seen
any of this stuff ever. Like she's like been stuck behind those like walls like all the time.
She doesn't even know how to deal with a clicker, right? Like, she's so confused when they're just like, be quiet. It's like, you feel like they would teach them that at least. Like, I get not teaching them how to swim, but probably be prepared in case you run into clickers, bloaters, runners, all this other stuff.
Right.
If you hear this noise,
right.
Drop your pants and hide in the closet.
I feel that I'm back in music class when they're doing harmonic dictation. Like I'm supposed to know if it's a minor chord or major chord. That's a triad.
Good old music theory. I hate it.
Yes.
Yeah, boy.
Now, are we going to talk about the moment? We got to jump in. I think it's about that time.
Do it.
So they find out, because of the pack of runners that has just lain there bathing in the sun and running away from sunlight at the same time, that they can't take the long way. They have to take the short way. They say museum. And as soon as we get to the museum, you can see it from afar. you see how it's covered in fungus, and they're weary, and the greatest thing happens. For the first time, we see Joel and Tess scared. I love that they don't hide that they're scared. Like, they know that they're never going to be in control of the situation or of what's going on, right? And the idea that Ellie is seeing them scared, you can see her. You can see that she's now scared.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love how they literally go to their pack, which is, again, I got to say it, one of the best game Easter eggs ever, because that's one of the things of the game. You constantly go to your pack and do what you need to do. They grab the flashlight, they grab the gun, they go in there. But what I love, again, lived in experience, the first thing that Joel does, what does he do? Because of all the fungus that he sees, he checks the network.
Yeah.
He makes sure that it's not an active network.
He's like, it's all dry. We should be good. It's all dried up.
Exactly. I love how it's like, yes, you're using the information that you're giving me to make, and you're making that, like, it's like, that's the best way of exposition, right? Where it's repetitious, but in variety and in different uses, right? As opposed to you hearing it once and suddenly appears at the very end and you're like, oh, so we just wasted 5 minutes there because you wanted to show me a picture 5 minutes later. Like, that's like the worst way. Like, I love how it's employed, right? So when they went in,
also great line, really quick. Great line was Joel waves the flashlight to Ellie. He's like, "You got one of these, or you just have chicken sandwiches?" It was great. It was very good. Very good line. Pedro Pascal delivered it great, and just see it because like he's also like Joel's still in kind of like fuck this kid mode, like this like dumb kid. Do you at least have the basic essentials so I don't have to like really shoulder this burden like complete like 100%? Can I just shoulder 80% of it? Like you can see him like still annoyed, and I love that.
He's such an asshole.
It was a funny line. It was a funny line though.
He's such an asshole to this kid.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
But we also like, by the way, Bella Ramsey, just quick shout out. She's great in this episode.
Yes.
She really like got the snark down. Ellie, like she's really good. She's really good. Any trepidation I had, because I didn't like just know her, so that was the only trepidation. I was like, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, so she's great. She's really nailing it.
I love how every episode we have to just remind the audience that Britt has not seen Game of Thrones.
Yes, it's the thing.
It's the thing. You have to let everyone know I've never seen it. And you know what? I'm not gonna. I don't care. I don't care about it.
Yeah, valid.
I mean, if they had put John Hamm in Game of Thrones,
then I would have watched it. If John Hamm was in it, 100% I would have seen it.
That's so awesome. Funny.
So now I love how it goes into talking about snarky Ellie, right? And how scared and interesting the conversation is of how well Joel and Tess know the world. As they're walking through the highway, they're going through that overpass. When she's talking about the infected, it's like, yeah, they make up stories. Oh, there's not swarmers infected. And she goes like, oh, so that means that there's none of these that like hide in the dark and speak like bats. And they all look at each other like, oh shit. like that's the one thing they don't say. And you're like, oh boy. So now we're going into the museum. You see all the things, everything's dark. You see a bunch of people that have died and have become reefs of fungus. Yeah. Right? And then we see a dead body, a fresh kill.
Yeah.
And Joel's response. Tess they're like frantic. And whenever Ellie speaks up, Josh, you'll like
he's like, shut up.
And then the rule, which I love how it sets the tone for the rest of the sequence, right? From now on, we're not quiet. We're silent. And like, I'm pretty confident a lot of people got A Quiet Place vibes real quick.
Yeah.
Like, we're silent.
He turned to John Krasinski in that moment.
Yes. Yes. And I love how, like you said, Brett, were you happy? Because you were talking last episode that you wanted more horror. You wanted them to dig into this.
Yeah.
Tell me.
This was like a masterclass in tension, and it was just great. I mean, listen, again, it has to do with that budget. I mean, First of all, the museum is legit the museum out of the game, like straight up. They were just like, yeah, we're gonna
100%.
nail this environment. It's 100% accurate. And like, yeah, like the whole sequence is like almost the exact same thing. But the way they just introduced the clickers and like, listen, the clickers are just like one of the coolest like creature zombie variations that is out there. Just like the way they move, the way they sound, the way they look, and the makeup team, absolutely incredible. That's prosthetics. That's a real actor doing it. It's not CG. It's absolutely terrifying. And oh man, just like everything, man. Them hiding behind the counter. I was like, this is the game right now. I'm crouching. I'm hiding. I'm about to throw a bottle. Like I'm about to, like it's amazing. Yeah, they got even the gap in the teeth, which is like a nice little detail. That little split right in the middle of the mouth.
Is horrifying, so cool. Man.
Yes. That is like, imagine that. That is way worse than just seeing like a rotting man. You know what I mean?
And the idea that we got all the angles, right? Like,
yes.
And
they weren't shy about showing him either. They didn't like tease you with the shit. Like, dude, the second episode, we're getting like one of the most like. Because listen, obviously they do show up early in the game. But like they could have did the stupid TV thing and just been like, we're only going to give little glimpses and we're going to withhold it and just tease you for like, endlessly until like the end. And I like that they're just like, nah, man, like here's all the cool shit you want right up front. Like we're not going to hold anything back. We're going to give it to you and we're going to give you like, yeah, I could see how terrifying that is. I don't have to like imagine.
No,
it's a great design.
And it's great the idea that. Also, because it goes back to how much Craig Mazin, more than anything, right? Because they are co-showrunners, right? But at the same time, Craig Mazin is the TV guy here, and he loves the story so much that when he went to the project, it wasn't like, okay, what needs to stay? And you can definitely tell that the story beats and the acts of the story are remaining there. He's not moving the way the story flows. So it needed to happen here. And I love how this entire episode was practically dedicated to build the tension for this moment. Because not only do you have the conversation about the runners, not only do you have the little tease where they're talking and Ellie says the guy was like bats or whatever. When Tess is looking for a way around the building before they get to the runner pack, when Ellie and Joel are finally having a conversation by themselves for the first time, by the way, it's like she's asking, like, is it hard to kill someone? Have you killed a lot of these things? And he goes, do they all look like that? And so, well, most people when they're infected, they last a couple of months, but some people have been infected for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So like there's so much very smart setup in the writing.
Yeah.
And also the conversation is so interesting that by the time you get to this, you're thinking about all of that previous conversation. You're like, holy crap. And also, it's funny how you say that they didn't hold back, but they really set up that moment very well. And I have to mention this Easter egg of the game, because not only do they capture the museum, but also in the game, when part of the museum breaks down, that's what triggers the clicker encounter.
Yes.
So
awesome.
It was so great. Like, that's where the clickers come out, and that's where they get separated. So like everything was there. Yeah. And then whatever happens off screen happens, which we're not going to talk until we get to that moment. But the idea that we have them just you hear the noise. Like they did it so well, because first you get freaked out by the noise. And you can see in Ellie's face, like, what the was that? And then you see them walking around, and suddenly you get to a point where they're right beside you, and literally they use this shot from the trailer, which I think was just
oh my god,
what a great way of introducing it. It's just so great.
I just love it. You hear the initial they're like shriek, but then like it's just the follow up like clicks after are just like so unnerving. Also, shout out shout out to when they got split up and Joel's by himself and he's silently reloading the gun and they keep the angle so you can just see down the hallway and just see it slowly shambling, but then the camera kept panning over closer to Joel until you couldn't see it anymore, and you know it's gonna pan back over, but like it was just done so good, and he gets the gun and then it's just right there like in his face like and you're like,
also,
oh, so
shout out to Joel having to take time to reload his gun.
Yes,
you know how much you run out of ammo fighting these dang things on this mission.
Yeah, no, that was great. They have the real shoddy aim, just like in the game where it's like not balanced. You're kind of like, oh.
I love how this entire encounter is just from the video game, though, right? Like you start off trying to be super stealthy, and then quickly it just evolves. You're like, okay, I'm in a shootout. How do I get out of this?
I stepped on a glass bottle, Osh. You know, like oh, crap now.
No, one of the brilliant things, did you guys notice that how he's able to draw their attention so he can actually reload? He literally knocks something over against glass, and that distracts the clicker. Yep. Just like if you were to throw a bottle onto the other side of the room.
You gotta send sound in other directions, and that's like just hope they don't like slash the hell out of you when they come by. Yep. That sequence was just like chef's kiss. Jeff Goldblum kiss.
Jeff's kiss. Yes.
Jeff's kiss.
Yes. So good. So we make it. We get it to the top of the museum, so we can cross over. We get that scene from the game where literally they're crossing over from one building to another on a plank of wood. I mean, I'm kind of grateful that they didn't have to find the plank of wood; it was already there.
Yes.
We get the bandage that Tess uses for her ankle. Literally, like the tape and whatever, like all those little details. Like, I'm pretty confident that's the kind of thing where we as gamers go like, ah.
Oh, we should throw a quick throwback then. Right when they got into the museum, and she was like, "Joel, see if she can give me a boost." And I was like, "Oh, you go press X to give Tess a boost." It was like legit that, and I was like, "That's." I'm like, "This is great. This is so good."
Yes, because it's organic. It's not forced. It's just exactly like, oh, he thought about me.
Yeah.
Like he's.
Because I love it. Like I'm watching it with my wife, and she knows the story, like a lot of the story, because I've told her about it. Because I was like, when I played the game, I was like, oh my god, this game is amazing. But like, she doesn't know that she hasn't played it. So like, really for her, she's the general audience, and I'm the big nerdy fan, and it's great to like go to her, and then like I get to tell her after the episode, I'm like, so this was like this was that, and like she probably doesn't care at all, but I tell her anyway. And she has to listen because she's my wife. That's the wonderful thing.
That's her job.
Yeah.
But so we get this scene, which what a great shot of these two characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you can't deny the view.
Yeah.
And then Tess goes up front again, leading the pack. They got to make their way over there, right? They get to the state building. And what do they find? Sadness and trauma, right? Like a bunch of fireflies that were there. You can see the truck. There's no supplies in it, but there's a lot of blood. Apparently, one of them, just like Tess was mentioning before, one of them got bit, and they literally just killed each other, trying to survive. And now there's no hope, or now Tess is frantically looking for something. And I want to ask you, Brett, because I'm pretty confident this came up, unless you already told her about this.
Right.
What was your wife's response when she found out that Tess was infected?
Yeah, she was just my wife was just like, oh shit. Like, basically.
Yes, which was funny. That was Ellie's reaction in the game. Like, oh fuck, she's infected, but. It makes sense, like her change in demeanor, right?
Yeah. Like she totally like got like so panicked and was just like, I was like, okay, what's going on? Something's funny.
Yes. So here's where the masterclass in acting kicks in, right? Because there's so many beats that occur here, and one of the things that was interesting, as soon as Ellie comes out and says he's infected. Joel says, show me. And Anna Torv moves forward, and you can see Pedro Pascal kind of like flinches and steps back.
Yeah.
Which is funny because if you listen to the HBO podcast, that wasn't scripted. That was just Pedro Pascal's instinct, like just do that. And the funny thing is, they didn't mention that in the podcast, but I caught it because I didn't catch this moment. But if you remember, back in the hotel, when Ellie finds the dead body, when she moves like the cart of luggage and the dead body comes out of the water, when he helps her up, after he helps her, he goes like, because remember, she's infected. So he kind of freaks out as well. Yeah.
He's got like, he's like genuinely scared about the virus.
Yeah.
So he's got like PTSD, or something like that.
And like he doesn't want to be like the world is taking everything from him. The last thing he needs is to be infected.
Yeah.
But when you guys got the reveal, one of the interesting things that they do here that's super brilliant that I was not expecting, which I don't know if you guys caught it. It's how they respond. And I learned this in the podcast because I never thought about it this way. This is how they respond to the fact there's no spores. We spoke about before that in the game, there used to be very aggressively filled fungus areas where there would be spores that if you breathe too much of them, you would become infected. So in this world, spores are not a thing. So the way they answered the spore situation, which if you remember in the game, right after the whole incident in the state building and The Last of Us actually begins, because it's just Joel and Ellie, they go down into a subway tunnel. And that's the first time that Joel sees Ellie breathing in spores and not being affected by it.
Yeah.
In the clicker encounter in the museum, Ellie gets bit too.
Yeah, she does. She gets bit again. Yeah.
So I love the line where she's like, "Oh, if it was gonna happen to somebody, it should have been me."
Yep. And then you can see Tess's face like she's over it now. And the idea that when you see Tess's body reacting to the infection, and she literally goes to Ellie, Joel, take off your bandage, and you see both of them, and how she's almost completely healed already.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating how, as a television viewer, now you're convinced that she is special.
Right.
Because it's funny how for a moment when it comes to all the hope, right, Tess is like the stand-in for the audience, but also for all the disbelief that you could have, Joel is that stand-in as well.
Right.
Like for people that are called, everybody that calls bullshit, Joel is that person for them. And anybody that was hoping for something to get better, Tess is that person. So you got someone to stand in for all different viewers, but now it's like the undeniable fact. She's real.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I was just going to add that makes perfect sense, right? Because when we first meet Ellie, she's in chains and we don't necessarily know why. Right. And then we discover that she's already been bitten. And she's saying it's 3 weeks old or whatever, but we don't know that. We don't know how recent this was. We don't know how any of this works. And that really was just reaffirming as an audience member, okay, this is legit. And these are the moments where rewatching the episodes really pay off for me, because having played this game multiple times, I already know that. And so it's oh yeah, you've got to remind people that she's immune to this, huh? It's a good thing you had her get bit a second time. It's actually a really clever way of going about it.
Right.
Because I just accept that she's immune because I already know that she's immune. So it's just, I kind of have to turn my brain off a bit and just accept the show as it is. Yes. And oh yeah, from a storytelling perspective, you do have to change some things to make this make sense. And so you have to have the dialogue be a little ham-fisted sometimes of, Ellie got bit again. We've got to highlight that fact for later on. It's just interesting.
I love how all those little things are subtle, though. Yeah. That's why they work, right? Because they're so subtle and underneath. And then when they actually have to be used to drive a story point, that's where it's heavy, right? That's the best type of exposition. The most subtle of expositions is that. Now, one of the things that I found from the podcast, I'm talking a lot about the podcast because they talked a lot of interesting stuff, but
dang it, we want folks to listen to our podcast. We don't care about them.
I know, but they
let's make a podcast about the podcast.
And then the podcast about the podcast, we'll listen to the podcast.
Yes, about the podcast.
See, now I forgot what I was going to say. But it's okay.
Podcast.
It'll come back.
Oh, by the way, I found a podcast that's called The Last of Pod or something. Like all the names are taking off. Everybody's taking all the podcasts. Now, Tess does what she needs to do.
Yeah.
But as soon as she reveals what happens, apparently one of those fireflies wasn't dead, but was infected, and is activated and moves and tries to attack. Joel does his thing, which, by the way, very like lone warrior, like slowly grabs the gun and just knocks him out. Brett, what happens next? As soon as he knocks that guy out.
I'm trying to remember now. Is that when
this happens?
Yeah. Oh, the tendril thing. Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
okay.
that was like, bro.
I'm like, I don't remember the exact moment preceding that. I mean, or right after that.
Yeah, when this happened, what was your reaction to this?
Yeah, no, that was cool. I was like, oh, I see the appeal of the tendrils, and I said, this is a good change. This is a cool change. It's interesting. Okay. I believe it. Like it feels like it fits into the world. And I was like, that's really cool. That's neat.
Yeah, it's so much creepier than spores, honestly. Like I think I like when I watched this episode, I didn't know that they took spores away. Like that wasn't in the news cycle when I watched it for the first time.
Right.
And so that's why I really hated like the Last of Us press tour, because I felt like they were revealing so much information that is better organically experienced. So when I saw this moment happening, I had no context for it. I'm just like, oh God, this is horrifying. Like the fungus is literally just going to grow and wrap around you once it's got you. It's just so scary. And I just love the animation, right? I love the zoom in and you see it just kind of creeping up. And it's like, oh my God. It makes getting infected even more terrifying, honestly, because it's like you don't want to become a part of the hive, which is a new layer of fear that I didn't even have when experiencing the story for the first time. Because it's like becoming a clicker is bad enough, but it's like you mean to tell me I'm now being controlled by this entity, and just it's over. It just shook me to my core watching that scene happen, because it's so unexpected when it initially starts, and it's so different from the game. And again, going back to the differences, I just really love it because it's just adding to it. It doesn't feel like we took anything away by removing spores. It's just something different that really fits this version of the story.
Right.
Because the spores too is like a thing where it's like, okay, this room has a bunch of spores. We know the room's dangerous. Put on your gas mask. Okay, let's just go through it. Like, whereas like I feel like these things could show up at any time. You don't even see them. You don't even know. It makes the environment like now like more dangerous, because it's like you have to watch out where those things might be like growing or coming out of. I'm sure they're gonna play with that more, into the season. But one thing I should mention too, and I'm sorry I didn't pull the link. I did read an article today, and I forgot where, and I believe it was Neil Druckmann quote. So I don't have it in front of me. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm sure you could look it up. He talked about the spores. He said, "Listen, we don't have spores in the show." But he's like, if you've been listening, we have said the word spores a few times in the show already. So he said, I don't know that they're going to show up this season, if they're going to show up this round. But he's like, I wouldn't say that their spores do not exist in this world. So he also left it very open. So like it could be a thing, like if they do a season 2 and decide to cover The Last of Us Part 2, and if they stick with like the 5-year time jump, it could be like, oh, okay, now there's spores because things evolved a little bit more. So they could actually naturally work spores into it if they want to go that route. They've used the word, so it does exist. We're just maybe not going to see it visually on screen, which I think is cool, because like that could be a way to differentiate a second season or like an additional installment, whether it's The Last of Us 2 or they try to branch out and do something else. It just leaves things open. Again, it's you could tell it's been planned and thought through very smartly. We just got a great comment too. But yeah, go first.
Yes.
I was just gonna add, I'm glad you mentioned the evolution, right? Because this isn't a spoiler, it's in the trailer, but like even the evolution of infected to runner to clicker to bloater, right? It's just showing that things naturally progress as time goes on. So yeah, if we do a time jump and then they introduce the concept of spores, or it's relegated to a different state, a different part of the world, and it just hasn't made it to where our main characters are, that's also a way they can go about it too.
Yeah, certain regions, like certain biodomes, like reacted in that way and started producing spores versus tendrils. Like they could do a lot of fun stuff with that. So that's really it's real schmat.
No, schmat.
Real schmat.
And it's also interesting because you do have other types of infected that are introduced later on in the game. Like you don't like they do just see different versions of what you see, different evolutions, different expansions, right? So I love how this sets up. It just keeps growing the world, and now it has even more possibilities than it had before. So the idea that this is just something, I love the idea that the show is adding things that expand the story and the world. They're not diminishing from it.
Yeah.
Like to the point, like even if there's no spores in the future, right? Or whether they are, it doesn't matter. This was a great solution to give us something that would connect to us in the show. And because of the connectivity presented to this via the spores, right? In the moment where Tess is literally giving her life to allow Ellie and Joel to have
buy them some time. Just give them a head start.
A head start, right? A head start in their journey to Bill and Frank's name drop.
Yep.
We get the moment that G-Techie says in the chat. He says, "How did you feel about the kiss?"
Oh boy,
we got to talk about this because first off, not only was it interesting and weird and creepy, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that guy. That type of infected feels like a stalker to me. Which
because he didn't get consent.
I have a feeling that he.
I'll see myself out.
Okay. Maybe he's. Oh my god. But here's the thing, though: the fungus is growing in her, so maybe the fungus inside of her. Okay, I'm making this conversation worse.
Well, move on.
The seps.
Yeah, the seps. So so there's a type of infected called stalker that actually have a lot more control of their movements, and they literally sneak up on you. And I love how he stops in the middle of the chaos, and he has a lot more cordyceps and fungus. Like he's like pre-clicker.
Right.
I love the distinction of the different ones, but when this happened, I found it so interesting and so disturbing because it's another way of illustrating the connectivity of the fungus. Because we know that she's becoming that.
Yeah. So I want to curious real quick. I don't want to cut you off. I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, what was your initial reaction when? Like it started walking towards her and she wasn't moving, because it took me a hot second and I was like, why is she just standing there? Like, and then I was like, oh, like that little bit that's already, I guess you were going into that. The little bit that was in her already was like, stay put and let the guy come and do the gross thing. And she was like, and she just had to stay there. And that was like really, that was like, I was like, yeah, that gave me the good horror stuff. That was the good horror stuff.
No, and that's just the worst way of putting it. The good horror stuff.
The good horror stuff, you know.
I hate everything about this.
No, but it also kind of highlights that the infection, the first thing that what it attacks is your brain. It attacks your nervous system.
Yeah.
So that's the infection doing its thing. And if you guys remember, I should have pulled the slide, but if you guys remember in the first episode, when they're interviewing the kid that was found outside of the Boston QZ, you see the little postcard or the little panel in the wall where it tells you how quickly the infection can take you. And if it's close to the neck, that's the quickest you'll get infected.
You don't have much time. It's a couple of minutes, right?
And so that's why you can tell that she's rushing all the time, and she's just moving forward, and she's like trying to stay away from everybody. And
it already hit like her brainstem, man. It was like here, so he was like already there. And
and you can see her hand is trembling already when she's touching Ellie, which, by the way, it connects to that student with the bracelet in the first episode where the hand is twitching. So everything is like getting together. Yes,
there it is. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, 5 to 15 minutes. Yeah,
that is
So the idea that she's trying to of course, the typical, like horror thing, right? The lighter does not work. Like it's traditional horror.
That was like mean, man. Like they
Yeah.
really let that not work for a very long time. Like her death, like it was, whatever. We at that point we knew it was coming, but like they really like let her like suffer for a while before she was able to just like get out of her misery. And like
Yep.
I respect that. But it was like I was like, damn guys, just let her get out already. I was like, give her a break. And they just would not. They like let her really get to like it was past the last minute. Like it was
it's so weird because if you also think about it, she's surrounded by grenades. It would have been so easy just to
pull the pin.
Pull the pin. Just pull the pin.
That's a very good point, actually.
But then again, the nervous system. Is she in control of her body?
No, yeah, at that point, I guess, yeah.
But no,
she just could have been more prepared.
That's a perfect. Like just freaking matches, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and the idea.
What are you buying? What are you selling? Imagine the merchant was just there, and he was like, "What are you buying? Oh, a grenade. I'll sell it at a high price."
Is that Resident Evil?
Resident Evil 4.
Can you just imagine if Brock and Sindri were just like, so you need a lighter fix, eh?
Yeah, that would be amazing. Sony's just like, we're sticking all of our franchises into The Last of Us.
R.I.P. to Brock.
Yeah, rest in peace, Brock.
Rest
Spoilers for God of War Ragnarok.
Spoilers. Sorry. I mean, for those that haven't seen it on Amazon Prime because it doesn't exist yet. So now, how powerful was it that the episode ends with no words? Just a sight that they're officially have a head start, but Tess is gone. What was your reaction to the way the episode just ends?
Mike?
Yeah, it's powerful, right? It leaves you with a lot of questions. We, of course, have an idea of where it's going to go, but I really like how the entire message of this episode, of this season, honestly, is save who you can save, right? And so I feel like that being Tess's last wish,
right,
it's going to play heavy on Joel going forward. Right. And I really appreciate like the silence, right? Because you can feel that he still doesn't care about Ellie, and he's probably blaming her a lot for what just happened because he wanted to turn around like 20 times in this episode.
Just go home.
Yeah, and so
he wanted to Ellie in the beginning of the episode. Basically.
Yes.
It was like, I am ready to pop a cap in this girl.
No, and as soon as she goes, like Tess has to go. Don't.
Yeah, that was great.
This guy's about to shoot you. G Techie in the chat says, I thought the runner was going to kill her first, so the kiss threw me off. We all thought that, bro. We all thought that. With the kiss threw me off, but then I understood. Loved how she used the last bit of her sanity to light the flame. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Set your heart ablaze.
In the Shiseo Sasayo. Now the cool thing about all this is, well, not the cool that she died, but the idea of save who you can save, right?
Yeah.
Which is like the motto of the show. That has to hurt Joel, because think about how many people he's lost.
Yeah.
Does he have it in him to save more?
I mean, even just Tommy too, right? Like the entire point is to find his brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's also like, though, like save who you can save, I think is also like save yourself.
Yeah.
Which I think, will come into play kind of later in a way, Yeah, it's really, man, they really are. They're nailing, like, thematically, they're on track. I mean, it's listen, it was all there from the game, you know what I mean? So it's just to adapt what you need to make it fit for TV, right. But like the blueprint was there. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, Right. And if you need to make the little tweak, make the little tweak. And that, so far, I mean, we're only 2 episodes in. I don't know if it's gonna go. I don't think it's gonna go too wildly off the rails. What they're doing right now is great. So if they continue with this level of a little bit new, a little bit of just like a little tweak on something that happened, and just
a little bit of this, a little bit of that,
a little bit of just keeping it very true to form and to the game. I think they're striking a great balance right now. So
So I have a list. It's a simple list. If I miss anything, let me know. So
Yes.
if we were to talk about the specific things, we're going into the game. We kind of talked a little bit about it, but we're going to be more specific, right? So there's a pack of runners in this sequence. In the game, the pack of runners is what leads them to run away into the museum,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Here, there's a pack of runners, but it makes them lead away from the state building. But I love the idea that all the beats and all the set pieces were the same. Cross,
Yeah.
museum, state. It was 100% the same, but they just moved certain things around because they made sense to move it around for the story that they were telling. And I think that's my favorite thing of all. Like you said, that if it ain't broke, not fix it. And I
They did a little
that,
swap at the end with Tess, you know, like it was
Right.
originally in the game, right? It's like dudes with guns. It's like
it was Fedra. It was
Fedra
the actual
comes in.
militia, but
In
now
this
it's
they
the,
just made it zombies. Yeah.
because it made sense because it continues the themes of the show, the themes of the episode, and that's one of the things. Like the best episodes of TV are those that in a way can subsist without the rest of the season, right? Like they are part of a greater whole, but they're a complete story within that framework of the 53 minutes that you're with them, right? And this episode definitely delivers because there's so much stuff here that, yes, it's part of a larger story, but you can watch this by itself and be freaked out and enjoy it all at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
I like to compare it to like, you know, it's like when you go to see like, you know, a band live, you know, like there are some bands you go to see and they sound exactly like the studio recording, which is like, can be cool. It's like, okay, well, they sound amazing. They sound good. They sound tight. But like, it's always so much better, I think, when you go and see a band and like they kind of change things up live. Maybe they jam out in a part a little longer. Maybe they, you know, just roll one song into the other. Maybe they throw a cover in there. Like when they kind of go off a little bit and like, you know, live in the moment. And that's kind of like what this is. It's like, you know, they're doing the show, but they're like adding their own little embellishments, you know, for the new audience each week, you know. And that's what I think. Yeah, again, that's the right balance to strike. And especially if you're doing an adaptation of a beloved property, whether it's a video game or a book or something, it's like, you know, play the hits, but don't be afraid to, you know, jam out a little bit, you know, add a couple of new drum fills in there, you know.
That's why, like, going off of what G-Techie says here in the chat, right? Like, switching out Fedra with the infected was the right call.
100%.
Because
way much more tension, right?
So much more tension, but
more.
Also it just builds off of last episode, right? Because episode 1 was very much introducing the idea of the infection, but we really see Fedra and the Fireflies like the main force when we get to that time jump. So I love how this one focuses on the other side of that and what's beyond the wall, right? Going outside, seeing what has happened with the runners and the clickers and everything out there. So I think, you know, remixing it like you were saying, Brett, throwing something different into the mix. You still have the base of what The Last of Us is, but don't be afraid to go a little crazy and change it up on us once in a while, because in the end it created a very well put together episode, honestly. Because like those changes you were saying, Brandon, they're so minor, but they still hit those major beats, right? So you watching the episode and you're like, this is The Last of Us. That's why so many people are fooled into thinking that this is a one-to-one adaptation when it's really not. It's just hitting the major beats of the story, but there is so much that's different about this encounter. Even Tess's death, right? Because she gets killed by Fedra in the game, and it's off screen. And like you can come back into the room and you see her body there, but having it be so dramatic and tense with her trying to buy time with the infected in here, her trying to get the lighter to work, just added a new sense of tension that wasn't really present, because when Joel takes her, you and Ellie now have to go because we're following Joel and Ellie because we're controlling Joel and Ellie. But by being a TV show, we can focus on Tess's last moments, and it just made it so much more dramatic in a way.
Yeah, like there was like so much more tension in that scene than like, yeah, okay, we could have just had a big bombastic shootout at the end of the episode, I guess, and then watch her get shot, and you know, people just, you know, like all that. And it's like, you know, like, do we really? I mean, that's like in every other show. It's like we don't necessarily need that either.
Right.
And just it's the fucking world. Not that the show's not violent, but like for real, like we don't need another stupid shootout. It was way more tense to have the zombies and get that cool creepy horror moment with the tendrils out of the mouth and the kiss and like way. Ooh, I got like my skin crawled. My wife was like, ew, like she was so revolted, and I was like, oh yeah, they nailed it. Like they got it.
That's awesome.
So disturbing.
I love everything you guys are saying because I love how these two first episodes literally gave us everything we needed to know moving forward about this world. There's no more questions. There's more to discover, of course, but there's no more questions. Like, we know that the remnants of, in the first episode, we find out that the remnants of humanity are mostly trash. like we know that, right? So we know that if we find other humans, they're probably going to be trash too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in episode 2, it's all about what the outbreak has caused. And now, as we go into episode 3 and forward, we're so informed and so well understand. We understand so much how this world works that now they can just tell whatever story they need to tell. So I can't wait to watch more of The Last of Us. Did you guys see the preview for next week's episode?
I have not.
I have not, but I have seen next week's episode, so I have an idea.
So, for those that have seen the preview, kudos. If you haven't seen the preview, you want to help out, that's fine. I'm not going to spoil it, but all I'm going to say is this. It's Bill. Bill's in this episode.
It's Ron Swanson.
It's Ron Swanson.
It's Ron Swanson.
It's Ron
Give me
Swanson.
all the bacon you have.
Yes.
I'm afraid you didn't understand me. I want all the bacon and eggs that you have.
No, I love, like, he walks away. He's like, wait, I think you understood.
Yeah.
To give me some bacon and eggs. No, give me all.
Yeah, I want
bacon.
all
of it. And the guy just walks away and goes like, I get it.
One of my favorite lines of all time, honestly.
Yeah. And the build up to that, like he's in the whatever the name of the guy is, and the guy's making steak and it's actually mushrooms. He's about to have a heart attack. It was so great. But yeah, Nick Offerman is Bill. I can't wait. This looks amazing.
Yeah.
Apparently he knows how to use computers in this show.
Don't forget the nail bombs.
Yes. One of the greatest things in The Last of Us.
I better see them craft some stuff at a crafting table. There better be at least one episode where they craft at a crafting table.
Yes.
Or you know what? Then I'm going to take back all the nice things I said about the show. I'm going to say, Neil Druckmann, you're trash.
You'll join the crowd.
Yeah.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Yes. Guys, if you guys loved episode 2 of The Last of Us on HBO as much as we did, let us know in the comments below. D-Techie, Derpy, thank you for joining us on the episode. Mike, thank you for just, responding to the call of tendrils.
We endured and survived, so it's going to be a great episode going next week.
Yes.
That's right.
Mr. Brett, if people wanted to find you, where can people find you on the webs, man?
You can find me at SuperBrettCon on Twitter. And you can also listen to me if you want to listen to me more. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. And I'm on the Fanboy Show on Twitter. That's at the Fanboy Show. Well, it's the Fanboy Podcast, but we had to do the Fanboy Show for Twitter. So it's at the Fanboy Show for SupermanOnFilm.com. And that is usually up. We released at a weird time this week, but it's usually up every Friday. So you can subscribe on all your favorite podcast services.
Mike, where can people find you?
Here. And I'm a cinephile. That's it.
That's it.
You can find me in the Shatter After Talking Movies. You can find me at the Amateur Otaku Pod with Jamie, Mike, and Isaac talking anime every week. We go live every Thursday. We're talking Vinland Saga this week. So if you haven't seen Vinland Saga and want to know what it's about, go join us. If you have seen it and want to talk to us about it, go join us on the live stream every Thursday at 7. And yes to this.
Find Bill's magazine stash. Yeah,
I think that happens. I'm gonna call. I
what
totally
I need is, again, I need the pun book. That's what I need. That is what I need. Thank you for joining us, T-Techie. We'll see you next time, man.
Every Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can't wait to talk more of The Last of Us. You can find me at the Scarlet Fan 52 on Twitter, and we will see you next week. And as the great Savage Starlight would say, endure and survive. Peace out.